Nancy, Mary Wynn and Nancy. I told her earlier, blame it on my mind and not my heart. It's been a long year. But the reason why it's important is because these candidates have worked extremely hard in something they believe in. I hope some of you one day will run for office, because there's nothing like serving something greater than yourself. There's nothing like that feeling of trying to make this place better, make Alabama better. I'm 45 years old. In my entire life, we have been at or near the bottom in everything that matters. And let me just be blunt, both parties were responsible. Before 2010, the Democrats had complete control. Since 2010, Republicans have had complete control. Both parties have let all of Alabama down. But there's something happening out there. There's a new generation of leaders that are coming to the forefront who believe that we've got to begin putting people over party. We've got to believe in each other. We've got to end divisive politics that doesn't serve any of us well. And the candidates that you heard from tonight, I know believe that. And the reason why I know I've been hearing them for over a year. And their stump speech hasn't changed. And it's not about tearing someone else down. It's about what we can do to build Alabama up. But we need your help, because I normally say this for the end of the speech, but let me go ahead and say it at the beginning. If we continue to reward politicians, and regardless of party, who refuse to engage in debate, who want to try to promote divisive rhetoric, who come to the table with nothing more than just empty words instead of solutions. If we reward that type of behavior, you're going to continue to get the outcomes that come with that. And that's being at or near the bottom in everything that matters. Every election has consequences. Every election has severe consequences. For this election, it has probably the most impactful consequences in 40 years for this state. And in a few moments, I will describe why. But I can't help but looking out this audience and think about being in your shoes not long ago. I paid off my student loan debt in 2011. I was very blessed. My mom was a school teacher, retired school teacher. My dad started out as a school teacher and ended up retiring in the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. When I was a freshman at UAB, my parents, when I came home for Christmas, told me they were selling their house in Idlewood, which is in East Tuscaloosa. It's a working class neighborhood in East Tuscaloosa. And they were having to sell it, so Sarah and I, my older sister, could stay in school. She was at the University of Alabama. And my parents moved to a rental house they had up in Fed. And my parents didn't think twice about it, because they knew the value of an affordable education, or value of an education. And they knew although it wasn't affordable, it was essential. Well, today it's been skewed even worse. And college is more expensive than any time than in the history of this country. And the making it so unaffordable is also skewing the difference between the haves and the have-nots. Because I do believe in this great republic we live in, that education is the great equalizer. It gives everyone that opportunity to make the best of the American dream. But if we continue to make it more and more difficult, especially for kids like me, and I imagine as I look around the room and as I told my story, I saw a lot of heads nodding, you understand where we are. And as Mary Wynn said, you can't get a degree in psychology or political science and not leave if you're on student loans without tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And now you're supposed to go start your career. That's why I've proposed the Alabama Education Law. And that's why a fundamental part, $125 million, would go towards scholarships, including 4-year, 2-year, and workforce development. So when we talk about elections have consequences, as I look around this room, I know that can make a lot of difference in your lives, in the lives of your family members, in the lives of your friends. And that's why elections have consequences, because ultimately policymakers are going to make these decisions. And unfortunately, they're making these decisions in other states that continue to jump ahead of us. That's why this election is so important. Let me just go into a few other things, and then I talk about solutions, and then leave it open for Q&A, because that's the most important thing to me. First, I'm honored, I'm going to embarrass you, I have my daughter Taylor here tonight. Taylor's 16, she's a junior at Northridge High School. She also takes honors college, don't hold this against her, at the University of Alabama. But she's open to where she doesn't know where she may go to college. And so I wanted her to come down here tonight to see Auburn. And it's because I have learned this is such a wonderful place. And I've enjoyed visiting on the campaign trail. And I must say, as a dad, it's a real honor to have your daughter with me. And so I'm glad Taylor and my son Eli. He's 5. He's in kindergarten. And when Stephanie and I were thinking, my wife Steph and I were thinking about doing this over a year and a half ago, we kept coming back to this question of, should we do this? Is it worth it? I love being mayor of Tuscaloosa. It's the best job in the world. I love living in Tuscaloosa. It's my hometown. It's where I grew up. Why would we want to do this? And Stephanie actually had the convincing argument, the closing argument by saying, and Stephanie does not like politics, and she's a Republican. Okay, so think about all that. And she goes, are we building a state where Eli and Taylor will want to grow up in, and where would they want to build a business in? And the truth of the matter is we're not doing that in Alabama. And the things I'm about to share with you are indisputable. Winston Churchill said, the truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is. So let me share some truths about where Alabama is today. First, our correction system, Department of Corrections, our prisons, our state prisons, is under federal court order by Judge Myron Thompson. When that court order ultimately comes down, when he prescribes what Alabama's going to have to do to fix its correction system, it's going to cost the state tens of millions of dollars. Our mental health system in this state has collapsed. We have lost 4 mental health institutions in the last 8 years. Nearly 1,000 beds have disappeared. And our jails have become the new crisis centers across our state. Bryce Hospital in Tuscaloosa, in 2009, we had to sue the governor to keep it open. Luckily, we won. But today, Bryce is the largest mental health institution in our state. Tuscaloosa Metro Jail is the second largest. 30% of our inmates are on psychotropic drugs. Our mental health system is collapsing across Alabama, and the worst place we can have someone who needs acute care is put them in a jail. Our infrastructure is depleted. 20% of Alabama's bridges are functionally obsolete. That means you shouldn't go over. But today, 1 million Alabamians went over those bridges, and tens of thousands of school buses. And yet, in the last 8 years, there's been no plan to address that. Our education system continues to be behind. Arise released an article this afternoon just talking about how unaffordable college has become in Alabama. And too many of our public schools are still in this cycle where they're not doing what they need to do. And healthcare is the greatest crisis facing Alabama. When I began this journey more than a year ago, I would have said education was the greatest crisis, but I really believe it is healthcare. 3 weeks ago, the CDC ranked Alabama as #1 in infant mortality. 9.1 deaths per 1,000 births. If you're African American, that number jumps to 15.1. These are the truths about where we are. And then just to add to that, we've been ranked as the most corrupt state in the union. So on top of the incompetency that we have in state government, we're also the most corrupt. Now, this election is worthy of debate, and it's well known that my opponent doesn't like debate. And as I said many times on the trail, that is her decision. She doesn't owe me a debate, but I believe she owes all of you a debate. She owes the families who cannot receive adequate care for their loved ones because of the lack of mental health services in the state. She owes them a debate. She owes the people of Haleyville and Wilcox County and Fayette counties who have had to raise their taxes just to keep their hospitals open. She owes them a debate. She owes a mother who is going to lose her child in Alabama because we rank 49th in prenatal care, who's going to lose their child because of that lack of care. She owes them a debate. She owes all Alabamians a debate on all these issues. And leadership is not about hiding. Leadership is about leading. Leadership is about confronting challenges, difficult challenges, the hard challenges. I've been mayor through the Great Recession. I've been mayor through a tornado that destroyed 12.5% of our city and killed 53 people and left 5,300 buildings gone, wiped from the earth. I didn't have an opportunity to hide. In that moment of crisis, Tuscaloosa needed leadership, and I was blessed and honored to have that opportunity. This is a moment in Alabama's history that cries out for leadership. So let me share with you just a couple of things that we want to do on day one. And then I'm going to stop there and answer any questions that you have. Now on day one, the first thing that I'm going to do is sign the executive order expanding Medicaid across the state of Alabama. We're going to join Now let me bore you about why that's important. How many of you, and be truthful, trust me, how many of you know why the expansion of Medicaid is important? Or think you have an idea? Okay, they've heard this so much, but very relatively few people, hey, by the way, most people don't, nor should they. By the way, leaders lead. And this is where leaders take complex issues and they lead the people they work for, regardless of party, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of socioeconomic status. Leaders lead. So why is Medicaid expansion so important? Well, the 2010 Affordable Care Act, everybody's heard of Obamacare, right? Everybody's heard of Obamacare, and it was well politicized on both sides. One of the regulations that came out of Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, was that states would expand Medicaid to 138% of poverty. In addition, because you would be expanding Medicaid to that provision, the federal government was going to begin to reduce its subsidies into hospitals. The reason why they would reduce the subsidies, when you expand Medicaid to 138% of poverty, you're getting working people. In Alabama's case, over 300,000 working people. Like a cashier I met last Monday in Livingston. She's working 40 hours a week, has children, but she doesn't have health insurance, and she's scared to death. You know, sometimes we take for granted when we have a sinus infection. We go down to the emergency care or the doc in the box, or in your case, probably the student health center, and you get a couple of shots and you move on. Well, those couple of shots likely cost somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple $100, if not more. Think about if you didn't have the money to pay for it. Think about if you didn't have an insurance card in the back pocket. Think about if you work 40 hours a week on maybe $10 an hour, what that would cost you. So you know what you do? You try to get by, and then you develop pneumonia. And then you end up in the hospital, and then that costs thousands of dollars. That same hospital doesn't get those payments anymore because we didn't expand Medicaid. And overall, what it's meant for our state is that we have lost 6 hospitals since that time. 6. The Alabama Hospital Association estimates we'll lose another 12 hospitals in the next 24 months because we didn't expand Medicaid. But it gets even worse. We've lost pediatric clinics, OBGYN. Morgan County, one of the most populous places in this state, no longer has OBGYN service. In fact, if you're born in one of 54 counties in this state, your life expectancy is now 6 months less than the other 13 counties. Our healthcare system is in critical condition. Now, the governor has not proposed any plan to deal with this. That's why the expansion of Medicaid is absolutely important. Now, I'll take you down a side trip. If we'd expanded Medicaid in 2014, we would have gotten 3 years at $1.8 billion for free, $5.4 billion for free. Then beginning year 4, the investment by the federal government is 1.8, and the state's investment is 180 million, 10%. Now, how many of you would take 1.8 billion for 180 million? All of it, because that would have been a good deal. And in fact, you could pay for the 180 million like Louisiana did from the savings and new jobs they created by expansion, because Medicaid expansion generates 30,000 new jobs. In Alabama, we did it. And you know why we did it? Obamacare. Obamacare. It had everything to do with politics and using the politics of Barack Obama that went into the lack of expansion of Medicaid. Now, that may have made for good politics, but what did it do for 330,000 Alabamians who got caught up in that? What did that do for the people of Haleyville? What did that do for the people of Fett and Wilcox? They had to raise their taxes just to keep their hospital open because of politics. How many people now go from an hour drive to 2 hours drive for health care because of politics? That's why I want to be your governor. I am sick and tired of that type of politics that hurts people. It can't be about the next election cycle. If that continues to be our modus operandi, we are going to continue to be last in everything that matters. That's why on day 1 I'm going to sign that executive order to expand Medicaid. The second thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to call the legislature into session, and we're going to pass the Alabama Education Lottery. And that's going to generate $300 million. The only losers from last week's Mega Millions and Powerball were the students in the state of Alabama. Because students elsewhere, they got their scholarship programs increased, they got their pre-K programs enhanced, and we didn't do anything in Alabama. And this discussion about the lottery has been going on for as long as I can remember. It is time that we pass that lottery, and in our lottery plan, we want to put $125 million in scholarships, as I referenced earlier, $90 million into universal pre-K, $25 million into wraparound services at our schools that are struggling. Why wraparound services like mental health, social, and healthcare? When you're 49th in prenatal care, you have a lot of children who are coming into our classrooms who need help, who need other services beside academic that we need to move up and onward. And so that's why. And the last is we want to put $60 million into our Promise program. That's really going to help our rural school systems because of their millage rates. They do not get the same quality of education as other places who can afford more. You know, I have some people say, well, that's a local problem. Well, no, it's not. Alabama's Constitution requires that every citizen of this state have equal access to a quality education. We can't abandon people in our rural parts of our state just because of where they're born and who they are. This election is consequential. I hope in the last 15 to 20 minutes I've outlined to you why. So let me close on this. Those who like the status quo, and mostly those are the people who we're running against in the big special interest groups that benefit by that. They're counting on something heavily. They're counting on you not voting. They are counting on you not showing up. This is not me trying to give you some pep talk or trying to manipulate you into going to the polls. That is just like I talked about Winston Churchill earlier. It's a truth. Now, I think you can show them something. The reason why we came to Auburn tonight, and the reason why we've been to campus after campus, is not because we're trying to get media coverage, not because we're certainly trying to raise money. It's because we know this election probably impacts you far greater than any other demographic in our state. And we need your help. Alabama needs your help. If we come out on the short end of this election, I'm fearful that Taylor and Eli and the rest of you are not going to stay here in Alabama. You're not going to invest in Alabama. And we're going to continue to lag behind the rest of the nation where it matters the most. Rhetoric has not served our state. The politics of now have not served our state. This is a moment that requires leadership. This is a moment that requires all of our voices to be heard. Dr. King said our lives begin to end the day we remain silent about the things that matter. If you do not go vote, you have remained silent about things that matter to so many of your fellow citizens. This election has consequences, and we need you. Alabama needs you. And all of us that have spoken here tonight, Mallory, Mary Wynn, Nancy, we all need you. But more importantly, this is a moment where you can benefit not only yourself, but your children and your grandchildren and the next generation of Alabama. So I want to stop here and take a few minutes to answer your questions. So who would like to go first? Sure. Who wants to go first? Come on. Yes, sir.
How winnable is this election?
Oh, it's very winnable. We know from our internal polling it's very winnable. It comes down to a couple of things. Number one is we had to have a base turnout similar to Doug Jones in 2017. Without that, we can't win. But I believe we can, and I'm really beginning to see signs. The second thing is I really sense, not only just through polling, but just from being out in Alabama a lot, is that whether you're Republican or Democrat, you know something's not right. And we've seen this in really a lot of the previously Republican concentrated areas of the state. They've been hit just as hard as Democratic areas of the state. And I think they're looking for a change as well. The last thing I'll say in my race in particular, I think there's a considerable amount of backlash against the unwillingness to debate and engage. I think a lot of Alabamians, Alabamians, by our very nature, we rise to every challenge and we don't run away from it. And I think a lot of Alabamians have a lot of concern about that. I know Mallory's faced a very similar situation in her House District race. I think it's very winnable. Any other questions that you may have?
So what do you attribute the fact that she will not debate you? What do you attribute that to?
I think we're on the right side of history on these issues, and I think that there's really no answer for Medicaid expansion. There's no answer for not wanting to support a lottery. There's no answer for the continued corruption. I mean, the fact is that the administration has been paying Robert Bentley's legal bills continuing since November of 2017 when he was dismissed from the charges that were related to his time in office. So why are we continuing to pay over $400,000 in legal fees? It's all these questions that can't be answered. And that lack of transparency, if you're transparent now, just imagine what happens if you're elected personally, you'd have to ask her. I imagine she would say it's good politics.
But you said as governor you're going to sign the Medicaid expansion. One of the things, actually Nancy's opponent said, well, I'm not in charge of that, and I have no say in that as a senator. He blamed it all on the governor. Is that true, or could the
Governor can expand Medicaid through executive order.
But could the representatives and the senators in Alabama get together and say, hey, governor, this is what you need to do?
Well,
assuming they had
certainly there's checks and balances. They could not fund the Medicaid expansion itself. But here's my feeling. Both Republicans and Democrats know this needs to be done. They're just looking for someone to blame. I will happily shoulder that blame because I think to me you had so many people in 2014 run against Obamacare. They literally believe that they support Medicaid expansion, they're supporting Obamacare. And let's also remember this, Alabama is one of 18 states that's involved in a lawsuit that, among other things, would disallow pre-existing conditions. You could not get health insurance. Your state is one of 18 in the country that is basically saying if you have health insurance, and let's say you were switching companies, and that company, you had a child with some pre-existing condition, if they were successful, could preempt that company from providing your child health insurance. Think about that. All right, is that values? You know, I'm going to bend here. I'll probably get in trouble with my campaign staff afterwards. But I hear a lot on the campaign trail about values. You know, we had to have these conservative Christian values. Well, I'm a Christian. I'm a proud Methodist. And personally, I believe that Jesus is my Savior. That's what I believe in my heart and soul. Those are my values. And my values tell me that every single day I respect everyone regardless of their faith. My values tell me that I live by the greatest commandment. And every day, my values tell me what St. Francis of Assisi said. Every day preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words. That's what my values teach me. And I have such disdain for political leaders that invoke Scripture and invoke religion, but turn a blind eye to those that Jesus was describing in Matthew 25. And until we're willing to stand tall and say these are not only the right things to do, but we can do it in a responsible fashion, we're not going to be very successful in elections. That is why I love what's happening in Alabama. You see a new group of leaders who are not running away from those values. And I hope none of you will as well. It is those values that should lead us to allow those 300+ thousand working Alabamians an opportunity to health care. It is those values that should allow us to provide scholarships for tens of thousands of Alabamians so no parents have to sell their home. It is those values that should allow us to create more workforce development opportunities and better jobs for our fellow citizens. Those should be our values. And that's why it's so important that we are successful in this election. And I feel there's something happening out there. People are getting tired of this divisive nature of government. And I'm just not talking about, I'm talking about all the way down, national, state, and local. But the only way, as I said at the beginning, that we get rid of this dynamic is we don't reward people at the polls for invoking it. That's why this election is so consequential. Will, you can get mad at me later. I feel better now. Yes, ma'am.
What is your position on the opioid crisis in Alabama? Alabama is number one in the country for number of opioid prescriptions per capita, as I'm sure you know. It's out of hand. In addition, what is your position on supporting medical marijuana in its place to reduce all these deaths that are happening by the opioid crisis?
Let me start with the whole marijuana question. Number one, I think we need to begin decriminalizing marijuana in and of itself. The city of Tuscaloosa has actually began a move to do that. We proposed legislation last year. It's taking up too much time in law enforcement, and we just need to treat this as a public health issue and not a criminal justice issue. I believe in that we need to have medical marijuana be authorized. If a physician believes that that's something that's going to help somebody, let's say going through chemotherapy treatment, if it can help them and help their quality of life, why wouldn't we want to prescribe it? In addition, maybe it's a less cases where we might use opioids for pain management. And then again, there's a lot of opportunities we need to be looking at with medical marijuana, and I think it's time that we move forward with that. Again, if a physician, a trained physician believes this will help a patient, then to me the responsible thing is to do it. When it gets to the opioid crisis itself, this is where the expansion of Medicaid will matter. 1/3 of those nationwide who've benefited by the expansion of Medicaid, they have been, 1/3 of them have access to either mental health or substance abuse services. So we know that among that 300+ thousand working Alabamians, many of them, either themselves or their children, need to get into some sort of rehabilitation program. And so that's going to be one of the biggest difference makers. Now, I'm also very open to looking at prescription for the days and amounts that opioids can be prescribed, looking at different authorizing different type of alternatives to that, like my mind is blank, Suboxone. Thank you. And other alternatives. So that's where we want to begin addressing it. We've got to move this issue from a law enforcement to a public health. Any other questions that you may have?
My biggest fear for you and for the other people here running for office is that a lot of people will go in there and just pull the Republican lever. They don't even care who's running. It doesn't matter to them. And I know people like this, so I don't know how you address that. If you have any ideas about it.
Well, I think what's going to happen, I'm excited about Lee County. And Lee County is going to be one of those bellwether counties that we're going to look at on election night. Because I believe that not only can we win this county, I think candidates in this room can win Lee County and win their overall election. And here's why. I think there are a lot of people out there that are hurting, and they're just looking for answers. In our own polling, we only have 66% name recognition across the state. But when voters know both Governor Ivey and myself, we have a 9-point lead. So our job over the next 8 days is to continue to introduce ourselves to as many people as possible and make the case of why this needs to happen. Now, there's going to be some voters that, on both parties, they're going to vote that straight ticket. And that's probably 30% on both sides, I'm guessing here, but somewhere in that ballpark. But there's that 40% in the middle that as many people as we can make phone calls to, knock on doors. That's where you win this election. Let me tell you, when I was elected mayor in 2005, I was one endorsement that actually made a difference. It reminds me so much of this race. I was running against two great candidates, one of them an establishment candidate, another person, a businessman who nearly became mayor 4 years earlier. And I picked up the endorsement of the Alabama Education Association and the Tuscaloosa Professional Firefighters Association. And what they gave me wasn't a lot of money. They gave me people to knock on doors. And I barely made the runoff, and I was outspent 2-1. I barely won the general election, and I was outspent 2-1, but I had people. People are the great equalizers in elections. And so as many of you that can do one volunteer shift, 2 volunteer shifts over the next 8 days, you never know what a difference that will make, whether it's for Mallory, Nancy, Mary Wynn, Adam, who I see in the background. He has a stand-up routine following me. And so I'm telling you, I look around this room, I know none of you, you're working hard, you can probably, scrape enough money to go to Moe's Barbecue or something and go get a good meal. So I know that's going to be an impossible ask for a campaign donation, but your sweat equity, that's even more important. That makes a real difference. Any other quick questions? I know I've talked long tonight. Yes, ma'am.
So you said that we need a similar turnout to Doug Jones, who went in 2017 to win this election. And there was 96% of black voters and 60% of young voters supported Doug Jones. And they were kind of some of the biggest reasons that he did win. So I was kind of wanting to know, what are you doing to kind of incentivize voting for people of our age and that kind of thing?
Well, there's a challenge for us. And at City Hall, we always say the answer is money. What's the question? And to roll through. In Doug Jones's race, but by virtue of it being a national race, he had $25 million to spend. Think about it, $25 million. We have raised about $2.4 million, and we're top of all Democrats. And we we've actually stayed within about 700,000 of the governor since the primary, which is remarkable. And all that's based off small donations. But we don't have the money that Doug did because we don't have national parties. I think Doug raised less than $500,000 in state. So we don't have that dynamic here. And so what we hope will incentivize voters is continue to spread the word about scholarships, Medicaid expansion. You know, on December 12th, we got to show the world who we are. This election is about who we can be. And this is where your help is so important because as hard as we work over the next 8 days, I'll never be able to touch, 675,000 voters, which is what we have to win. But everyone in this room can contact 50 people. You can text, you can call, you can Snapchat, you can do whatever multiple way that you communicate, and I won't embarrass myself anymore. But you can do that, and I guarantee you that makes a difference. I guarantee you, as I look around this room, if each one of you just reached out to 20 people, you just influenced over 1,000 people in the election. And we don't even know the multiplier effect from that 1,000 that you just reached out to. And that probably wouldn't take you an hour. Let me ask you this. If next year or 2 years from now, that many of you are still in college, or maybe you're getting your master's, if 2 years from now, that scholarship program's in place, and it saves you $8,000, how much was that 1 hour worth to you? How much was that 1 hour you reached out to those 20 people to make a difference? That will be, you'll never be paid that much. Hopefully you will. Maybe you'll be the next, Bill Gates or whatever. But I doubt most of us in this room will never get paid $20,000 or $8,000 an hour. That's why elections are coming. Maybe you'll be that working person who will have health insurance because of Medicaid expansion. And that health insurance gets you by a year. How much is that 1 hour worth to you? How much is it worth? Good roads and bridges. Point is that you will win this election. Because I'll say this, momentum and energy is on all of our sides. So you can help us continue that way. Any other quick questions that you may have? Yes, sir.
On transportation, what is your stance on a potential high-speed rail throughout Alabama?
I believe that we have to start small. I believe our best case for high-speed rail is going to be on the Gulf Coast. The governor right now has basically forfeited the idea of having rail go through Mobile, through Atmore, and on to Pensacola on a line that would run from Pensacola to New Orleans. I believe that's where we need to begin. And as governor, I would work with the Southern Rail Commission in getting that train station reestablished in Mobile that will set up that high-speed rail corridor. That's where I would start first.
Awesome.
Any other questions that you may have? All right, so the election is Tuesday, November 6th. How many of you are registered voters in this room? Okay, good deal. How many of you can reach out to 20 people over the next 8 days and get them to the polls? Most of you can. I'm telling you, 20 people, and not only do you reach out to them, let's put in 2 hours of work. You tell them to go vote, and then on election day, you harass them constantly. Have you gone vote? Have you got to the polls? And the last thing that I'll say is you have a lot of candidates in this room, us included. We would love to have your help. Anything that you can do. One shift is what, Ebenezer, 2 hours?
Yes.
Is this Ebenezer Avalera, he's our statewide field director. Wade.
Yeah.
This guy's amazing. He worked in Doug's campaign. He's working in our campaign. What's a shift? What might a shift entail?
So we have a shift every 2 hours. You can do phone banking. Going along as what was said from before, we can actually give you a code to do phone banking from home. You can do canvassing. We have an app that you use your smartphone with. All you'll have to do is grab some lit. You'll have a script right there for you. Or if you want to help out with poll watching, we would love for you to do that as well too.
Please.
Poll watchers.
Please.
We are actually coordinating with Lee County Democrats and Mr. and Mrs. Joyner. They've been very helpful. They have an office on Opelika Road, 1775, I believe. So please make sure you stop by there. We're doing phone calls. We're hitting doors. Let's get this energy out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have some very, very good candidates here. The best we've seen in a very long time.